Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Special Projects replica build, and this time we've got a requested replica build of the Brabus version of the Mercedes SLR McLaren, one of my personal favourite cars. I absolutely love the SLR McLaren in all of its forms. This particular tune-up is one which has room for variation, because of course you could go for a different paint colour if you wanted to, and also, as you'll see in just a second, there is variation for sure with regard to the setup of the car. Now, as far as the visuals, I've fitted it with Enkei SC05 rims. I've gone for the standard size, and as far as I could see, they're basically the closest you can get to the actual Brabus wheels, which are a pretty chunky multiple twin spoke. And then as far as the body colour, the normal version of the Brabus SLR, which you tend to see, is in black. So I've gone for a black. I've gone for a metallic black called Grigio Granito, which comes from the Maserati Gran Turismo. It's a fantastic looking black. It's got a tinge of grey to it, and it's a very deep, luxurious looking black. I use it on quite a few of my cars. And so if you want that colour, that's where you can get that. But that's pretty much it for the visuals. So it's a relatively simple build. The real car does have a slightly different body kit, but not one which we can achieve on the game. And the body kits that are on the game are a little bit over the top. They take it too far compared to the real car. But of course, if you want to fit one, feel free to. So that's it for the visuals. Now let's go over to the mechanical setup. Now we'll come to the reason why there's variation with the build in just a second, but for now you want sport soft tyres. Obviously that's dependent on what you use the car for, your personal preference, etc. I've left the brakes stock, though if you do plan to race it, I would recommend racing brakes because you've got a lot of power and weight to bring to a stop. As far as suspension, we've lowered the ride height by about 15mm to 110 front and rear. We've slightly stiffened up the springs to 1250 and 1575. The dampers and anti-roll I've left on 3, but feel free to change those if you want to. We've got neutral camber and tow, as we often do. I've left the gearbox stock because as far as I know, that's likewise with the real car. As far as the diff, obviously you can change it around as necessary, but the SLR is a little trickier, funnily enough, than some other cars to get the handling to comply with what you want. It's a naturally very heavy car through corners, it understeers a lot, and to counteract that, I've got, as you can see, all 3 settings as high as possible. Now you can still feel the weight of the car, of course, but the handling is not necessarily easy, but definitely better than it was before. You can slam on the brakes more and not lose your line, basically, through the corner. It's a lot more controlled, a lot more malleable, and allows you to hold to a racing line much easier, basically. Now, as far as the power, the real Brabus SLR is quoted at 660 horsepower, and this is where your options come in. Because basically all you need to do to achieve this is an oil change and then fit the cat. Then you reduce the power down to, I believe it was 91 point something %, and that brings you down immediately to 660 horsepower. So if you want to, that's all you need to do. You don't need to do all the rest of this. But the reason why I have fitted all of these other parts is because that allows you to have the same power, but also have a rounded off, more useful PP level, because naturally the car sits at something like, I think it's 583 or 584 PP, something like that, which isn't really that usable. Now this build is first and foremost for fun, but still, it's nice to have it rounded off if you can. You don't have to fit all of these, of course. You could round it off, I think, to 585 or 590 if you wanted to, but I just did it to 600 to show what your options are. So if you do want to round it off to 600 like I have, basically just do all that you see here. Fit all the parts, sports exhaust, and then reduce it down to 69% power, plus, as I mentioned earlier, an oil change. As far as the weight, you want to do nothing at all, because according to the specs that I could find, the Brabus version weighs the same as the normal SLR. So, in other words, they probably have done a little bit of weight loss to compensate for the extra parts that they fitted, but the result, at least as far as I could find, is that it ends up weighing the same. So that's it for the build overall, and as I said, there is definitely room for variation there. And so, now let's take it out to a track, of course, to see what it's capable of. Now the SLR of course has never had an issue with speed anyway. It's extremely fast in a straight line even without any upgrades, so if you can bring the handling a little bit more in line to what you'd want from a supercar of this car's level and price, then basically everything else will take care of itself. Now, although that isn't totally the case with this model, it does still weigh about 1.8 tons, and you can feel that for sure, especially with the stock brakes. But it does bring it closer to that kind of level. It's still supposed to feel like a street vehicle. It is, after all, very much so an aftermarket street vehicle, not a race car. But that being said, it definitely handles better than it did, and you can notice that bit of extra power, especially on the acceleration side of things. So overall, if you do decide to use this build for say 600 pp or lower, then obviously I hope you find it fun, first and foremost in the case of this build, but also potentially competitive if you do decide to race it. But if you'd like to keep up with other builds like this as soon as they're released, you can do that by hitting subscribe down below, and you can check out builds which we've already done in this series by clicking through to the playlist at the end of this video. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.